This is a video about the game Storm of Steel, in which I'm attempting to illustrate why I do not think that this is a card-driven game. We have here on the left a card from a typical card-driven game called Shifting Sands, and we have here one from Storm of Steel. Now you can see at first glance they look quite similar. They have a number up here, they have, which is in this case is an operations number. They have a kind of an event that could possibly happen. Then they have some other sort of numbers for various functions. And so looking at a typical card-driven games card and then looking at one for Storm of Steel, you would probably go, oh yeah, okay, so that's like the operations point. Here's the event, and there's just some special considerations, and that's some extra thing. But in actual fact, they function quite differently in each game. So for a start, that is not an operations point, and that is really the main difference. But let me explain a bit more about that in detail before you say, yeah, it's just a different name for the same kind of thing. In normal card-driven war games, what you get is you will get a turn, and then you will have, say, 7 or 8 or 5 or whatever cards in a hand, which you draw from a deck, so you don't know which cards you're drawing. And then you have to choose through what operations or functions you're going to perform in that turn based solely upon the card. So for example, if I was playing Shifting Sands and for my first card play I wanted to prevent the Axis from playing a disengage, I would play this card as an event. And then my opponent would play a card, and then I would go to my next card, whichever one that was, and play that. I might not play it for an event, so I'm just getting some cards here. So for example, if my hand was this for the turn, then I'd say, okay, that's my first play. Then it's my play again. I'd say, okay, this one, I don't need reinforcements right now. I'm going to use that operations. I can move, I don't know, 3 units, 3 stacks, or a unit, 3 hexes, whatever it is in the game, according to my operations point. So I'll play that. My opponent would play. I'll play that event, I don't know, reinforcements, replacements, operation, like that. So back and forth, so on, until I played out all the cards from my hand, and that is the end of my turn. There is nothing that I would do without a card play. So I could not move units, I could not bring on reinforcements, I could not add replacements, I could not, I don't know, shift a leader, and I could not have a special event without a card play. So the only thing I could do without cards is basically sit there and receive activities upon me. Now obviously in different card-driven war games there may be slight differences. There's 1 or 2 things you can do without cards every turn. But in Storm of Steel it's completely different. So for example, that's my hand in Shifting Sands. That determines my turn. In Storm of Steel, my turn could be determined by that, or it could be determined by that. And in fact, I've completely misled you already into saying my turn is determined by it, because, or let me just finish that example that I was playing, or it could be, I could have, for example, that, and that is the maximum I would have in any turn of Storm of Steel. That would be 1 card for each theatre and a weapons or tactics or contingency card. But I might have none at all, and that is because everything that happens in Storm of Steel, so like operational movement, combat, mobilizing units, bringing on reinforcements, etc., etc., all of that, so that generally the operational stuff happens without any card play. So I could play in all my theatres with no cards, but if I did have a card such as this one in the Eastern Theatre, then I would actually have 2 extra impulses. So that would effectively mean I would get 2 extra move and combat segments. And that might be a bonus over my opponent. He might not have any card in the East, and so he wouldn't be able to reply to it. Alternatively, he might have played a card in the east as well. He might have only played one with a 1 extra. Forgotten the name. I just said it. Impulse. And so I still get 1 impulse extra than him. We would both get our normal impulse without any card play, and then this fellow would get 2, and this fellow would get 1. So the Central Powers would get another one, then he would get 1, and the Central Powers would get a third one, all on their own without any response from the Entente. The number up here relates to shifts. So for example, this is a defensive card, so that gives a 1 left shift in combat, and that gives us 1 right. So this is really responds to that, it cancels that out. So what that means is the campaign cards in Storm of Steel are played when you want an extra push, but you don't. It doesn't mean that. Let me hang on a sec. Yeah, okay, I gathered my thought. It doesn't mean that to do what you want to do in that turn, you need to have a card. You might be able to do what you want to do in that turn without a card. For example, down here, the Ottomans might be aiming to take the railway there and completely cut off the British units here. In that case, they would just move and do it. However, if, for example, they were aiming, okay, I'm going to try and capture Suez or Cairo, then they would look through the cards, and that's another thing, you don't pull from a card deck, you just have a stack of cards. You get the extras added each year, but you just start with a stack and it's completely your choice. So looking through the decks, they'd go, oh look, I've got a card, and it gives me a bonus in morale if I capture one of these, and I get an extra impulse and an attack shift. So if that is my objective, then that is that I will use that card and it will help me gain the objective. However, this does not drive your objective decisions. What I generally find as I'm playing is that I'm determining what are my necessary objectives. You know, what are the war aims? Like in the east, the Germans are trying to get up to Petrograd. And so I determine what I want to do that turn, and then I look to see if there's a card that supports it. So you're not determined by the cards, but you might be funneled in certain directions you don't want to go by the cards. So for example, say I want to have extra movement so I can sort of come right the way around here. Well, I wouldn't get an extra impulse to do that unless I satisfied the objective of taking one of the cities. And it would be the same in a similar theatre. I might get extra impulse, but then I'd have to satisfy the objective of, for example, destroying 10 enemy units. So, and I think what that really nicely illustrates is the tension between the political and the military objectives in the war. So for example, militarily you might know, okay, this is what we need to do, but politically your political leaders might be saying, well, okay, you want to do that, but we need you to take Cairo, or a city, or we need, if you're going to do that, we're going to give you all this resources and this extra map and so forth, you're going to have to destroy that many enemy. It was very crudely put in the game, of course, but you can understand how that political tension to say, okay, we need this year, you want a big push, okay, that's acceptable as long as these are your gains. And that is what Storm of Steel plays with in these campaign cards. The other cards you have are contingency cards, which, that's an objective. Where's my contingency gone? Okay, the contingency card, which is just various extra things, and the weapons and tactics cards. So essentially you always play one of those a turn. If you don't play one, you're kind of missing out, because it's basically a decision between, am I going to do something more diplomatic or do something more in terms of developing technology, or perhaps I'm going to have to organise a counterattack because I don't have a campaign card in a certain theatre and I think the enemy is going to be playing one of theirs. So a contingency counterattack can give you a reply to that. So it's not a card-driven game because the cards do not drive it. I would say it's card... you could say card assisted. It's been used before, but in essence that is what happens. These cards, The campaign cards assist your objectives. They don't completely drive them. They do to a certain extent, because you don't have free choice. You have a set of choices. So, but they are sensible choices, such as take 10 units, capture a capital city, or so forth. But you get a high payoff for that. So it's not straitjacketing your gameplay, but really it's simulating that the wedding between political and military constraints within performing a war, especially on this scale. You cannot get 3 extra impulses and a 2 right shift without there being a lot of demands made upon you, a lot expected of you. If you're going to use that much manpower and resources, there better be some significant gain for it. So that's essentially how it plays out, and I hope I, if not have persuaded you, have at least enlightened you to a way of looking at this, and to see that it is not in fact a card driven game, not as we know and understand them.